You were living in Brussels for 10 years. Do you miss Brussels at all?
I miss Brussels a lot. I like Belgium, I like Brussels, I like the food, I like the people, I like actually the beautiful parks. Oslo is great, but I miss Belgium, and I spent 10 years there.
It's ironic though, because NATO headquarters, of course, is based in Brussels, but Belgium itself has a hard time reaching the 2% of the GDP requirements, spending on defense. How do you look upon that?
Well, as a former Secretary General of NATO, but also as a Norwegian minister today, of course, I would like to see all allies meet the guidelines we have agreed. And as far as I know, Belgium have now really started to increase and is committed to increase, because we live in a more dangerous world. We need to invest more in defense. And as a Minister of Finance today in Norway, I know that if you spend 1 billion more on defense, there is 1 billion less for something else, health, education. But that's the price we have to pay for peace in a more dangerous world. It's a price
to pay, you say, but in your capacity, former capacity as a Secretary General of NATO, how did you go about inspiring those countries to actually step up? Did you ring Belgium's Prime Minister at the time, Minister of Foreign Affairs? What did you say?
Well, I met with the Belgian Prime Minister, different Prime Ministers, Foreign Ministers, Defense Ministers, and I urged them, of course, to follow up on the pledges we made that again and again at the NATO summits to, at that time, invest at least 2% of GDP on defense.
Belgium sets it ahead by 2029.
Yeah,
still dragging its feet?
But Belgium is a highly valued NATO ally, and Belgium contributes to many NATO missions and operations with different capabilities, and that's something highly valued. At the same time, NATO allies expect that we all meet the obligations we have agreed, and this is now not to spend 2% anymore, but even more, 3.5% on defense of GDP. But it is difficult for many countries because if there is going to be more money for defense, there has to be either higher taxes or less on something else, other good purposes, or more borrowing. But borrowing is a challenge because more and more NATO allies, they have huge public debts, and for several allies, they actually spend more on interest rates than on defense.
So you understand the reluctance or the difficulty, but at the same time you're saying there's not really a choice, you have to step up.
That's the brutal reality. We all, also Norway, and I was a member of the Norwegian government in the 1990s, I was Prime Minister from 2000, and after the end of the Cold War, almost all NATO allies reduced defense spending significantly. We called it a peace dividend. But then when tensions are going up again, we need to increase defense spending, and we need to do it partly because we need more European defense capabilities. But also the only way to ensure that US stays committed to NATO is to demonstrate for them that Europeans are carrying their part of the burden.
Norway's airports were closed for a while in the past couple of days because of drones entering the airspace. Are Nordic countries, and Norway in particular, under threat, according to you?
The assessment by our security authorities, by the Ministry of Defense, is that there is no immediate threat of a military attack against Norway or any other country in NATO. But we live with a constant threat of hybrid attacks, cyber attacks,
spying operation,
spying, sabotage, and we have seen examples of that in Norway, but also in other countries. So we need to increase the readiness, we need to strengthen our intelligence, we need to develop technologies to, for instance, detect and deal with drones. We have already a lot of these capabilities, but I think this demonstrates that we need more of capabilities helping us to deal with hybrid and cyber threats.
And also shoot down drones or Russian aircrafts when they enter NATO airspace. Are you in favor of that?
Well, I think we, as Minister of Finance, and also a year since I stepped down as Secretary General of NATO, I'm not in charge of those decisions anymore. But
no, but it's a discussion going on.
But in general, I think we should trust the military authorities and also the pilots who actually have to assess different situations. There's a difference between a drone, which actually several drones were shot down over Poland, and an unmanned vehicle and manned or piloted planes.
Yeah. But how forceful is NATO showing itself to be then if it doesn't act?
Well, I think what we have seen is that NATO has readiness and NATO has presence over Poland. There were Polish F-16s, Dutch F-35s, German Patriots that all were activated and helped to shoot down several drones. Other times we intercept the planes which are coming into our airspace, or we escort them out. So I think this is about finding the right balance, making...
There is a danger of escalation, you think, if NATO acts too forcefully, too quickly?
I think the key here is to be firm but also calm, and to judge the different situations and to make prudent decisions based on all the information that exists. And one of the crises I faced as Secretary General of NATO was when Turkey shot down a Russian plane.
In 2015.
Yeah, that intercepted or went into Turkish airspace. So this has happened before, but we have seen more frequent violations of airspace, and therefore we need to increase readiness, have presence, and also develop capabilities to be even more capable of dealing, not least with drones.
Yeah. Was it always clear to you what the red lines were for Russia that couldn't be crossed not to escalate the conflict further?
Also, Russia knows that NATO is there to protect and defend all NATO allies, and that an armed attack on a NATO ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance. Then,
Article 5.
Yeah, Article 5, saying that an attack on one will be regarded as attack on all, one for all for one. But NATO has never given our adversaries, the exact information about when that threshold is crossed. Because there are different situations. There are airspace violations. Some are intentional, some are not intentional, and we have different levels of hybrid and cyber attacks. NATO has stated that a cyber attack can also trigger Article 5. So there has to be a judgment. There has to be a decision made in the specific situations. I think the importance is that we react in a calm but firm way, and that we show and demonstrate our readiness, as NATO has done in these different incidents.
For a long time, and you write about it in your book, you advocated deterrence and dialogue with Russia. You still believe dialogue with Russia is possible?
I don't believe it's possible now, any meaningful dialogue, because Russia is waging a full-scale, brutal war of aggression against a European country, Ukraine. But I think fundamentally that at some stage we need to talk to Russia again. Russia is our neighbor. We need, and Ukraine need, at some stage, hopefully, to talk to Russia about how to end the war in Ukraine. And we as Europeans and the United States and NATO, we need to talk to Russia at some stage to prevent a new full-scale arms race, and to try to find some way of re-establishing an arms control architecture. Even during the Cold War, we were able to agree on limitations on nuclear weapons, on strategic missiles with the Soviet Union. And at some stage we should try to do that again, maybe also with China, because arms control makes us all safer. But that has to be based on strength, on unity, and credible deterrence from NATO. So fundamentally, I still believe in the idea of deterrence, defense, and dialogue.
But as a young socialist and later as a prime minister, you had a good working relationship with Putin, for example, but also with Mr. Lavrov. Then you became Secretary General of NATO, and suddenly you discovered the interests were no longer aligned. There was no common ground. When was the first time that you realized, like, we're living in two different worlds, if that's not too strong a point to make?
Well, I would say that I gradually had to recognize that it was very difficult to have dialogue with Russia after I came to NATO in 2014. But as Norwegian Prime Minister, we were able, as Norway, to have a good working relationship with Russia. And I met with Putin when he was newly elected president in 2000. I was a newly elected prime minister, and we worked together on energy, environment. We agreed a borderline between Norway and Russia up in the Barents Sea.
Did you like him at the time?
Well, we had a good relationship, meaning a good working relationship, and agreed, and we met at several occasions, and we worked closely. Yeah. But when I came to NATO, I continued to work for dialogue with Russia. And we were able to reactivate something called the NATO-Russia Council. And we actually had meetings in the NATO-Russia Council just weeks before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine to try to find a diplomatic solution to prevent the invasion. But at that meeting in the Brussels headquarters, also described in the book, it is obvious that Russia is not seeking a diplomatic solution. Russia wants to control Ukraine, and they are planning a full-scale invasion. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you have one party that uses military force, attacks, violates international law, then there is not much room for meaningful dialogue. And
what outcome at this moment in time do you see for Ukraine?
Well, first of all, I strongly believe that it has to be the Ukrainians that decides what is an acceptable outcome. Second, I strongly believe that as long as President Putin believes that he can win on the battlefield, the war will continue. And thirdly, I don't believe we can change Putin's mind. His aim is to control Ukraine. But I think we can change Putin's calculus, that if the price he has to pay for controlling Ukraine is too high, then he will be forced to sit down and negotiate a solution where Ukraine prevails. So military support to Ukraine is the only way to convince Putin to sit down and negotiate an acceptable solution.
But you don't exclude the fact that Ukraine may have to cede part of its territory to Russia?
Well, it is again for Ukraine to decide, and nothing would have been better than if the Ukrainians were able to liberate all their territory. They have now liberated 50% of the land Russia controlled at the beginning of the war, and of course we should support them to liberate more land. But I use Finland as an example of how wars have ended. Finland was attacked by the Soviet Union back in 1939. And at the end of the Second World War, they were forced to give up 10% of the territory, their second largest city, but they got the border and they got security. And these are dilemmas that also Ukraine and we all have to face.
How worried are you that this still may spiral out of control, what's going on now, and that a full-blown Third World War might happen?
Wars are dangerous, and wars tend to last much longer than we believe when they start, and there are always a risk for spiraling out of control. At the same time, the approach from NATO has been two-folded, meaning that it's about supporting Ukraine, as NATO allies do, also Belgium, but then also preventing the war from escalating beyond Ukraine. That's also the reason why NATO allies have not sent in troops and engaged directly in fighting inside Ukraine, to support them to defend themselves, but not involve NATO directly.
And they shouldn't in the future?
No, I have believed, I supported that strategy, that we need to support Ukraine, but not involve NATO directly in the war. But of course, when we decide not to send in NATO, then it's even more important that we arm Ukrainians enough so they can defend themselves.
You were called the Trump Whisperer during your tenure at NATO. What is the secret of communication with President Trump, according to you?
I don't think it's a big secret. I think it's quite straightforward. It's to talk, it's to engage. And I remember back in 2016 when Trump was elected president the first time, there were voices in NATO countries saying that, no, it's dangerous. We should not go over to Washington. We should not provoke him. We should not irritate him. So we should try to just stay away and then hope it will change in 4 years. At NATO, we disagreed. We had another approach. We thought it was important to engage, and we did. And I think the same applies today.
Yeah. Is Trump a different Trump compared to Trump?
In some ways, I think that the current Trump administration has even more confidence in itself. It's more determined to actually change things. But I think fundamentally for Europeans the same thing apply. We need to engage, we need to spend time, also on issues where there are disagreements on trade, for instance. And second, we need a no-regret strategy, meaning that, for instance, investing more in defense, that is the right medicine regardless of the diagnosis, meaning that if you hope that that the United States can stay, then you increase the likelihood for that by investing more in defense, showing that we actually carry our part of the burden.
Because you dare not hope or believe that Trump will, or President Trump will definitely be a reliable and continue to be a reliable ally of NATO and not leave, for example?
But I think that instead of speculating about all possible and impossible outcomes, I think it's more important to discuss what can we do to maximize the likelihood for a good outcome and minimize the likelihood for a bad outcome. And then to invest more in defense is the right answer regardless. Because either by investing more in defense, we demonstrate for the United States that it's actually good to be in NATO. The Europeans are paying their part, and the United States stays, so then it's good. Yeah. Or if the United States suddenly decides to leave NATO, then it's even more important that we are invested in our own European defense. So investing more in defense is the right answer regardless of what you believe will happen.
The win-win, he called you write in your book, and mentioned the Nobel Prize to you. Why did he do that, and what did you tell him?
Well, I had a phone call with President Trump this summer to prepare a phone call with Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre, the Norwegian Prime Minister, later on. And the main topic of that conversation was trade tariffs. It's well known in the United States and all over the world that it's not the Norwegian government that decides on the Nobel Peace Prize. That is an independent Peace Prize committee. So that is the message to whoever raises that question.
Yeah, but he dropped a hint.
Well, it's not for me to go into that conversation. I'm only saying that I'm confident that, and I know that the US administration, as the governments all over the world, know that it's an independent Peace Prize committee that decides on the Peace Prize.
Last question. As a young man, you stood against NATO, argued for Norway to leave NATO or not be part of it. In your book, you describe a couple of times moments that you say, I was wrong, I didn't see Trump coming the first time. I thought Putin would act differently. And now you've been Secretary General for 10 years. How do you look back on it in general? Do the usual ways of doing things, the usual rules in international politics still apply, or do we need a new rule book?
I don't fundamentally need a new rule book, but we need to respect the rules we have. I think it's more a question of that international norms are violated and international institutions are weakened and not respected. So of course there will always be a need to develop and to strengthen and to make perhaps new rules, but I think the main problem now is a lack of respect for existing rules. And I believe in international institutions. I believe in the big institutions we built after the Second World War to prevent war, the European Union, NATO and the UN. And in different ways they are all under strain, but then it's our responsibility to make sure that we strengthen and develop these tools to continue to preserve peace.
Mr. Stoltenberg, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.